Thanks, Sahara. Appreciate that. I'm glad to be with you here today. So, points of interest is I guess, a unique aspect of indoor GIS, and I wanted to talk about that specifically today. I have had one previous webinar on this topic, but I think it's important as we get into specifically indoor GIS, ArcGIS Indoors, and communicating and making user-friendly maps and apps. So traditionally, we look at points of interest. They referred to locations that were typically destinations, and those might have been landmarks, monuments, places where people were going to navigate to, usually long distances, driving in a vehicle. So, kind of that was generally the use case for when you heard the term points of interest. Certain websites, organizations would even go around and collect, and maintain points of interest. They would distribute those to make those publicly accessible. However, now when we're talking about indoors and indoor GIS, obviously those points of interest are not necessarily public accessible, but they're very usable and very needed. As we look at modern points of interest being indoors, you can now, with indoor GIS, have wayfinding and navigation, but also points of interest bring connectivity and they bring information that they can serve as a gateway to your information portals. And that's really kind of the way to look at these, is it's just a way to engage with location user-friendly, in the user-friendly maps and apps, but yet they have so much information behind them. And uniquely, obviously, with indoor GIS, the thing about points of interest is they have to be floor aware. We need this floor awareness so we don't have all of these points stacked on top of each other, especially in a multi-floor environment. So that's something we're going to touch on today. And in addition to navigating throughout the building, it's very important that we have elevation attributes associated with our points of interest, or at a minimum, the floor ID or level ID associated with those points of interest. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but particularly elevation is key when we talk about points of interest for indoor GIS. So examples of points of interest kind of historically, and as we think about these different scales and coming down from a high level, at a mapping level, citywide, large area, you're talking point of interest might be a city, a mountain, a park. But then as we drill down, we have site level points of interest. And these examples of these might be trees, monuments, manholes, things that you're going to look maybe across a campus, and you're going to have those site level points of interest. Then we move down into a, more from the 10,000 foot level, and we get down into more of the 1 foot level into building POIs. And those might be examples would be like a control panel, where are the restrooms, equipment, various equipment across the floor plans could be. And then we can even take it to another level with points of interest, and you can look at an asset level point of interest that might be a button or a fixture or a part within a room. An example may be if you wanted to get to the level of electrical fixtures, you might have a light switch represented by a point of interest potentially. So a lot of different points that you can use those for, but that's really going to depend on the type and the scale of the map that you're looking at. So particularly in indoors, how are they used? One thing they are used for is searching. It's important that we have those POIs available as we search the categories from our indoors applications. Routing is important. And one way to think about points of interest when it comes to route networks is I like to say that they are the nerve endings of the route network nervous system. So that's one way to think about those POIs. You have to have them when it comes to routing in order to generate those route networks and have essentially destinations to route to. And lastly, they're used for symbolizing. And that's something we're going to dive into a little bit today, is the actual symbolizing and how to create custom symbols of those points of interest. 4 ways to create points of interest. 1, they can be imported from CAD or BIM layers. They can also be imported from your databases, if you have information that connects those to the floor plans. For example, a room ID, you can link your databases to the room centroids just using the room ID, and you can generate them that way. Another way is to digitize them in ArcGIS Pro, or using field maps as you go through the building to be able to collect and digitize points of interest that way. And lastly, one way we like to collect those from scan data or 360 panoramic photos, a really nice and handy way to be able to extract those points of interest from actual 360 photos as you go through the building. So minimum requirements for ArcGIS Indoors specifically, as we think about these, POIs, the points of interest, having what do we need for those attributes? For one, we definitely need location. Like I said, even if you have a database, you could be using XY location if you have it in your database. Otherwise, grabbing that, just dropping those points on the map. We need a unique ID for each point. We also need a category. We got to be able to sort those and be able to view those by category. And then the name and display scale, if you want to be able to use those capabilities as you zoom in, having those points turn on and off as you zoom into different levels. Level ID is very important. Being able to tie that as you toggle, your floor awareness, having the correct points show up on the correct floors. Vertical order, that's important. And always remember vertical order for when we're talking about indoors, ArcGIS Indoors, we use 0 for the ground level on vertical order. And what that does, it helps tie your buildings together across campus as far as which levels will view as you navigate and toggle to the different ones. The elevation is important, as I mentioned earlier. 3D points with Z values. So we want to make sure when we create our points of interest feature class, we want to make sure that those are Z enabled, especially if we're going to use those for routing. It's very important to have those Z values associated with that. When it comes to choosing our icons, what are we going to symbolize our points with? Esri recommends using SVG symbols because they can scale at different resolutions. They're pretty handy. They are basically vector type symbols. So it's just something to keep in mind. You won't lose that resolution that you can sometimes when you use other pixelized formats. So you got two options. One, you can load from a file if you're bringing in a POI icon, or you can load from style files, which will show you that as well. And those style files are available with the Indoors product data downloads. And when you download that information from My Esri, it'll save it at this location on your PC, and you can pull up those style files in there. And just some general ideas on categories, kind of to get you started. These are some that we typically see, kind of the broad categories: places, safety and security, accessibility, mechanical and utilities, furniture and equipment can be a category, as well as, emergency response. You can also have categories, say transportation, which might include bus stops. Some subcategories of these, for example, safety and security, we'll take a look at, but there's things like security cameras, AEDs, fire extinguishers. Those would fall into that safety and security. Accessibility is an important one because we want to typically know where building entrances are, ramps, all types of accessibility features that are important for ADA compliance and knowledge there, but they're also important when it comes to emergency response with accessibility, needing to know quickly where we can enter and exit the buildings. Okay, now I'd like to move on to the demonstration part as we kind of get into ArcGIS Pro. So let's kind of pull that up here and pull up my notes here on. So basically I wanted to talk through kind of bringing in the POIs and kind of where we get started. So as I mentioned, the different ways to create them. One, obviously importing from CAD or BIM data. And that's what I've done here. Basically, I started with some points that are in the BIM, the Revit files here for this example. And when I open those up, there's just not a lot to those. When I look at the attribute table, really not a lot of attributes associated with these other than the level some basic information on the room. So typically you're going to need to take some time to populate additional fields, assign attributes. What I've done in this scenario is I've exported the points of interest from the Revit file to my ArcGIS Indoors data template into my geodatabase. And I just did a data export for those features. And again, I sent those to my Indoors geodatabase. And that's what I've got here as I turn on these other ones. And what I've done here in this example, you can see down in my attribute table here, I've actually assigned some base categories to these points. So some of them I assigned as places. Other ones I called network devices. I also have one called equipment that I threw some of those in there just to give you an idea here as we go and look at the different categories. Now, I need to talk about briefly, I wanted to mention this feature. It's somewhat new to the Indoors environment, but if we go under the View tab, you'll see the Indoors menu option here. And there is a tool called Configure Indoors Category. I'm not going to talk through this tool right now, but I did want to make you aware of that. Esri does have some great documentation if you're interested on their website that explains how to use the tools there. But it might be something worth taking a look at where they try to make that a little easier for you on basically categorizing and coming up with those. But I'm going to show you here kind of an example as we look through this. If I need to symbolize those POIs, obviously I need to do that before I publish to my ArcGIS Online or Enterprise environment with Indoors. So I want to symbolize by field. So I'm going to do that here. I'm going to go to feature layer, and then I'm going to symbolize by unique values. And in this case, I'm going to select that base category field that I told you I populated. And I'm going to go ahead and click this button here to add all values. And you'll see I've got then the equipment, network devices, and places kind of pop up there under my layer symbology. But I need to have some type of something that describes these better. So for like equipment, I come over here and I've just got my general ArcGIS Symbology. Well, this is where the style files that you can download with the Indoors product data come in really handy. And I wanted to show that, how we can add those in. So I'm going to come back here to Catalog, and I'm going to go under Styles. And this is where we'll just bring these in here. I've got these already open for us. So under my Indoors product files that I downloaded, it's going to save it to that location. What I can do is just drag over my style files into my Pro project here. Anything with a STYLX file extension, I can bring those over. And now those will be part of my project. And so now when I click on my symbols to bring in some new symbology, I should be able to have those, and I should see those come up there in my gallery. So let's see. I'm probably gonna need to refresh that, but those will show up for me then once I do a refresh to have those show up so I can bring in the Indoors features that are a part of that. So once I do that, I have my new symbols in place. I can set up feature templates. So let's talk a little bit about feature templates. Basically, when I go to edit and create points of interest, I want to be able to set these up, these templates. And if I click here, I can see the templates that are missing. But I basically want to set these up so I have my attributes and information that are set for each of these. If I go to properties, I can tell it for equipment, you know, I need to have these type of attributes. And this is where I would say my base category is equipment. And let's say I wanted to add a specific type of equipment, I would then have a subcategory. And let's say that, you know, type of equipment, you know, was called a desk, or, you know, some type of more specific equipment. I would set that up in my template. So then as I create new POIs, then I just pick from my list over here. Those feature templates are really handy to have and to start with, especially when it comes to creating that information. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about if you wanted to customize some of the POI symbology. So let's look at one example here. And again, this is from the product data that I downloaded. Let's just take a look at safety and security, for example, here. So what I'm going to see, if I go up a few levels here, I'm going to see I've got where I had the style files. If I go under PNG images, I've got these different categories, and these come standard with the ArcGIS product data. And if we go into safety and security, you'll notice I have a few different pixel sizes. I've got 23, 46, and 69. Because sometimes we want to symbolize those features or those points of interest. We want to symbolize those at different levels, and so we need different resolution on those. But I wanted to look, first of all, I wanted to talk about if I want to create a new icon. What I've done here is I created a blank template icon for the safety and security with this certain red color that I have. But what I'd like to do is, let's say I wanted to come up with a new first aid icon. I wanted to kind of talk through that process and what that looks like. So if I go, I have it in my downloads folder here. I just grabbed something off the web, a simple little first aid icon, and I'm going to open this with what we call paint.net. And if you haven't used paint.net before, I would encourage you to download that, take a look at it, and explore it a little bit. But this is what's going to help us to create these custom symbols. And I thought we could kind of talk through that here and what that looks like. So it's a really handy tool. It's going to let me, I can add different layers here and merge those layers. But for today, we're just going to keep it simple. I'm just going to do a selection here. I'm going to crop this part of my image that I want to use for my point of interest symbol. I'm going to go to image and crop to selection. And now what I want to do is I want to change some of these colors. Obviously, I want to use that default red that I had. So let's go back here and open up my blank with paint.net. So we have that color available to us. And I'm going to use my color picker here. It's got a color picker, and I can select that red. That's the color I'm really after. And I'd like to transfer that red onto this new icon that I'm creating. So what I will do in this case, I'm going to use the flood tool. And I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to select using the hand, select this white area. And again, I do that using this magic wand, they call it. And then I'm going to use the flood tool because I want to color that area. And now I'd like to color the cross area white as well as the outside boundaries. So I'm going to do a little switch here on my color platelet. And now I'm going to color those, excuse me, I'm going to make those red. Let's do switch there. Oh, I see what it's doing. It's changing that white in between there. So in this case, we'll select just the middle part. And now let's say we want to make that red. And so here's where we're going to use our little flood tool, and we'll make that area red. So this gives us that ability to make that change. I could also make the outer area by using that little magic wand and select that outer area. I can do the same thing using that little flood tool, and I can make that red as well. So this is how you can create customized ones. Now, one trick, what I need to do yet before I kind of finalize that, let's just do a little bit of cleanup. I can trim, make sure I get the nice clean edges around the outside. And I'm going to do image and then crop to selection. Now what I want to do before I'm done, I'm going to do image, and I'm going to resize. And this is important because I want this new custom symbol to match the same pixel size that I had with my other one. So I'm going to do by absolute size, and I want to make sure I maintain the aspect ratio. And then I'm going to change that to 69. And I'm going to click OK. And then I will save that. And now that new symbol is going to be the exact same size as my other icons here. It's that 69 pixel, 69 by 69 there. So that's just one way you can kind of customize these. I thought it'd be nice to kind of show that. And then if you wanted to, of course, the next step, if I wanted to bring those in, then I would be able to import those here into my gallery, and I could import that style file You can import Symbology that way. But I can also have that added to my style files that I could then save for my future pro projects, my future indoors projects, to use that however I wanted. So it's a great way to be able to categorize those points of interest and symbolize them, creating your own custom symbols, because after all, what we're trying to do here is make this as user-friendly as possible for the end users. We really want them to be able to have that experience and get the most use out of the indoor maps as possible. All right, so that about wraps it up for us here. Just wanted to mention some additional resources that are available to you regarding the points of interest. ArcGIS.com, there's some help features there. Feel free to visit those. Configuring indoors categories, like I mentioned. Esri also has some ArcGIS tutorials that you can go to on the YouTube channel. You can check those out. There's some valuable indoors resources there. Here at CloudPoint, we also have our own indoors channel, so you can also see that. Same place this webinar will be when it's done. We'll post the recording to our YouTube channel there. Specifically, one of the ones I referred to earlier, we did a couple years ago. We have a webinar that there's a recording on our YouTube channel there talking about the point of interest and how you can use those. So